So, last conference that you were at was in 2013. That was before you sold Concur. And you've been on a journey since, CEO of Docker, and last year you joined Madrona Venture Group. You're investing in early-stage companies. Quite a journey.
It's been fun.
Great. And so, I'm particularly interested in the companies that you've been investing in, a lot of business travel-related companies. One particular one that has been in the news quite a lot, Spotnana. So what is it about Spotnana that really, you made it your first travel investment?
Yeah, to be honest, I really wasn't interested in investing in travel again until a few things started to change in the industry. And maybe before I get to Spotnana, I'll just set the context for what drove that decision. And look, this in the last 5 years or so, there's been amazing changes in the world. One of which is technology. Cloud computing really took hold over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And with it, you have the capacity to solve problems that you couldn't even dream about solving 15, 20 years ago, right? You think about the ability to analyze huge amounts of data to drive benefit, whether it's in healthcare or anything else. That's one trend. The second is obviously COVID. It forever changed at least our generation for the next 100 years. It's changed our perspective. And in my view, it's actually pushing opportunity across the globe. And so while it was tragic from a human perspective, in the long run, it'll actually be fantastic for humanity. And the third is capital. Capital is for all practical purposes on sale. And so those three things, when you look at that in aggregate, that drives an opportunity to really go create something amazing. And it was from that we just felt like, okay, if these things are happening, what does it enable? And we felt like that business travel will, first of all, by the way, I'm a huge believer that business travel will come back bigger than ever. Now, it's going to be different, but it's going to be, in my view, bigger than ever. And it was really that allowed us to say, hey, look, if we're going to see the world of business travel change, it creates an opportunity. Well, what do you want to invest in? And what I loved about Spotnana, in this case, although I want to talk about Troop as well and Center, but what I loved about Spotnana was it was a bottom-up build from literally the system of record for a traveler or for a trip. Right? I mean, think about most of the systems of record for travel and for trips today is largely 50, 60-year-old technology. And so the idea of understanding the individual and understanding the trip that they're on, by the way, our view is that the traveler profile will go with the traveler wherever they go, whether they're working at company A or company B or company C.
We just talked about self-sovereign identity right before this.
Yeah, I love that session. But then the next piece is that on top of that system of record, we felt like we can actually build a global, high reliability system on top of a cloud architecture that allowed you to deliver content, all the mid-office services, and of course all the booking services on top of that, all in a completely open platform. And that's what really got me excited about it, is that if you can build effectively AWS for the multi-trillion-dollar travel industry, if you can build a platform and make it open so that anybody can contribute to it, anybody can add value on top of it, or package it up and use it the way they want to use it, then that becomes interesting. I mean, look what's happened with AWS, right? I mean, you've got millions of developers adding value and building applications on top of that. And so that's really what drove it, is the capacity to have an open system.
So it's that microservices sort of architecture you're talking about.
It's a microservices architecture from a technology point of view, but from a ecosystem and business point of view, you take the approach that says, hey, look, you want to allow others to innovate and create value. Or is it, hey, it's got to be my system and you've got to use it the way I want it used. And we're very open-oriented, not closed-oriented.
Okay, and Ariel Cohen talked about this morning about sort of the way that they're looking to replace that entire tech stack, the TMC, expense, payment, et cetera.
Yeah.
Everybody, pretty much, all the new gen innovators in the business travel space especially, they all claim to be this disruptor, so to speak. Would you put Spotnana in that bucket?
Yeah, well, look, I think this is going to take me back a little ways, but we started off in on-prem software, right? Back when all the burden of success at the client level was actually with the client, right? They paid up front, they paid millions of dollars to deploy the software, and whether or not they succeeded was entirely up to them, which is a terrible position to be in as a customer. SaaS got to the point where we started to balance that risk reward. You know, you didn't get paid unless your customer was successful. Cloud computing gets to the point of purely consumption-based models, in my view. And so that all the burden of success really rests with the vendor versus resting with the customer. And I think that architectural shift, the business model shift, moving to consumption-based, right? Concur, obviously I love that company, it's a fantastic company, but it's a subscription model-based approach. Look what happened over COVID, right? The reality is people were traveling less, yet you were still paying for your services. And I'm not picking on Concur, that's what software looks like today. I think it has to move to a model where your revenue, your success is entirely linked to your customer's success. If they're using their product, they're paying. If they're not, they're not. And I think people who embrace these principles will actually innovate and disrupt in the marketplace. One last thing, I think best in breed is actually the differentiator and the winning strategy. The reality is building an expense management product, building a meetings management solution, or a travel platform, these are complex, hard problems to solve, right? I mean, we had, at the time we were acquired, we had 5,000 people at Concur, largely focused on expense management. It takes a lot to build world-class products.
I'm going to flip what you said, though, about the consumption-based model. Because during COVID, we also saw that companies which relied just on that transaction-based model, you know, the GDSs, for example, they suffered quite a bit as well. So, you know, is there a middle ground somewhere that you think might succeed?
This is what's beautiful about capitalism. It will determine the answer to that. But that said, I think that's the right model. I think that if your customer is suffering, you should too. You know, look, we'll find out who you know, which way this goes. But look at what's happening with AWS. Look at what's happening with Snowflake. Look at what's happening with these next generation cloud products. Almost all consumption-based models. Yeah. And that's so. If you're a Concur, or if you're a you know, pick any other company. I'll just pick on the companies that I happen to be involved in. You've got to look at this and say, hey, how do I compete with not just a new tech stack and deeper integration, but also new business models?
Does that mean you need scale, though? Because all of these companies, right, they've got immense scale and, you know, tens of thousands of customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course you need scale. But, I mean, look, when we started Concur, SAP and Oracle dominated expense management, yet Concur ended up being the largest player. Customers actually care about value. They actually care about, look, if you're going to solve the problem, solve it well. And that's what wins, in my view.
On Spotnana, so if I understand it correctly, Spotnana is kind of a platform, but it also offers TMC services, right? You could white label if you wanted. Tech suppliers or, you know, content suppliers can connect to it. Is there a little bit of sort of a conflict of interest, or, you know, how do you really focus when you're offering all of that?
And this is why it takes great teams to build businesses. But look, Spotnana has 4 customers that it serves. It builds a platform that it itself takes and packages it up as a TMC solution, delivering it to corporate customers. In that case, they're their own customer, serving the end corporate customer. It also takes that exact same platform and makes it available to any TMC to say, I will take this platform, deliver it as my own TMC service. You can add value on top of it. You can integrate anybody else's solutions on top of it. Go deliver it and differentiate. Third customer is technology companies that want to integrate on top of the Spotnana platform, or with. It's not really always on top of, but with. So meetings management companies, spend management companies, budgeting and forecasting companies, HR companies. And then the fourth customer is suppliers. Right? We think that the level of advancements in the ability to deliver unique supplier content has been limited. We think that the suppliers want to differentiate what they offer. They should be able to do that. On top of that, we also feel like suppliers can benefit from a common open system of record, right? So that you can actually start to think about the individual traveler profile in a much more robust model than what exists today. Let me put that into scale. Concur's got, I don't know the numbers these days, but probably 75,000 or so customers. Now, some people might joke that, boy, it takes a long time to get to 75,000 customers. Nobody else has done it. And so my feeling is that, hey, look, 75,000 customers over 25 years. And if you look at the addressable market of just middle market companies and enterprise companies in North America and in the EU, there's 1 million companies that fit that definition. There's no way one company is going to serve all 1 million of those corporations. So we think that the partner model actually makes sense here. So we may serve some customers, but we're going to have hundreds of partners that will serve hundreds of thousands of other customers.
Another thing that Ariel talked about this morning, I think you'll probably agree, is the focus on the traveler in business travel.
Yeah.
Because often, for the TMCs, a lot of their attention is focused on the companies and the corporations they serve. And Ariel said, and I paraphrase, that business travel really is about the traveler and their experience.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. I think at the end of the day, you have to know who you're serving. And in my view, that's the individual traveler, whether it's consumer or corporate. The key thing, though, is how do you serve them not just in this trip, but in every other trip they do, whether it's an individual business trip or a group meeting or a conference or a hybrid meeting. How do you serve those customers, whether they're company A or company B? And so in order to do that, you really have to dig deep on the technology architecture and say, look, we want to go build something that is a modern tech architecture for the system of record.
So really that ecosystem again,
ecosystem and architecture.
Yeah, so you get the architecture right and build an ecosystem around it.
Yeah.
Which brings me to Troop. You recently invested in them, and they're focused on meetings and events.
Yeah.
Center also. So talk about kind of where you're going.
So first of all, Troop is an amazing company. Dennis and I met about a year or so ago, and he's just so customer focused, so focused on delivering a great product that it was hard not to love him. And so as we got to know each other, what I loved about Dennis's vision is that he sees meetings. First of all, I want to share a metric before I go to this. Across the Madrona portfolio of companies, if I look at the last 18 months, the annual growth of revenues across all the companies is somewhere in the 75% or better, on average, right? The growth of employees is about 50% on an annual basis. The growth of office space, near zero in this time period, right? And so when you think about this and say, well, in a world where you have a distributed workforce, what does it take to actually run a business, to build a level of tight-knit operations, whether it's culture-based or objectives-based, whatever it might be? How do you do that? And our view is what's going to happen is that the amount of dollars that is invested in commercial office space will actually start to shift over to business travel, and specifically into meetings travel. And so Dennis, is in a beautiful position to go build an incredible business. But part of this is that his objective was not just to solve for centralized planning and booking, but also decentralized planning and booking.
Okay.
And because in my view, that's going to be the bigger chunk of meetings travel over time. And so I won't get into more depth in that because I think he wants to announce the details of it as he releases subsequent revisions of his product. But I think he's got a brilliant strategy to go after that piece. Center, this one is both a positive and negative. It's run by my son, who decided that he could do a better version of building Concur Expense than his dad did. And
isn't that how it goes? I see.
But my hat's off to him because he has, and he's out of the three businesses, they're the largest today, and he's growing at a couple 100% a year. But what's really amazing across all three of these, and I certainly maybe had some influence in it, but at the end of the day, it's not me. This is a reflection of cloud native architectures. the user profile, the travel policy across those three systems, guess what? It's the same, right? And it's not because they're being built by one team. It's because it's an open architecture that allows them to go leverage the work of the other teams.
And so you've mentioned this a couple of times. You're very bullish on corporate travel. You think it's going to come back bigger. We've talked about sustainability at this conference quite a bit. How do you kind of reconcile the two? Because more travel, I think, some might see it as contradictory to being responsible stewards of the environment.
Yeah, I may have a different point of view here than others. I don't think you can solve problems by going against the grain of what it means to be a human being. I would tell you, just as a perspective, I think social media, for example, is one of the worst things we've seen in the last 5 years or more. It tears people apart. And the reality is what brings people together is when you actually have a conversation, when you actually sit down with one another and try to understand each other's perspectives. This is one of the many reasons that I love the travel industry. The way to solve, in my view, how do we change our carbon footprint? How do we change, the negative impact we have in the climate against climate? It's through innovation. And I would argue that look, I mean, Tesla's done more for how do we change the negative impact on the climate than government regulations have done. I'm not opposed to government regulations. I think at some point, it's more about the innovation that we drive. And so my view is I'd rather invest in innovative people who can solve these problems in a meaningful way that can hit global scale.
So the best of both worlds.
Yeah, it's as most things. It's almost always a good blend of many points of view.
Just overall, I think we have a lot of startups and founders here. What's the one mistake or one thing, perhaps, that you did while you were at Concur when you were kind of building up that business that you tell founders to watch out for or not to do?
That's a session by itself, as far as how many
Maybe
mistakes.
next time we'll just focus on that. We'll start with that.
Look, there's the things that I could have done a better job at. Early on, I should have invested even more in my team and really helping them develop and frankly bringing in the very best people in the world. Now that's easy to say, and for most people that's it's a generic statement that you have no idea what the hell the guy's talking about, because everyone should do that. The reality is bringing in people who could easily replace you. Right? So one of the metrics around Concur that I love today is there's 18 people who have left Concur to go on and be CEOs, right? Of a company that at that time was 5,000 people. And that's a reflection of if you can find incredible people and bring them into your business, it improves the quality of the entire operation. And so that's an area that early on I got wrong, but eventually everybody learns, including myself.
Is that something that you look at when you're evaluating a startup?
Yeah, so this is like, if you look at Sarosh, who runs Spotnana, if you look at Dennis at Troop or Naveen at Center, there's a common attribute across these gentlemen. They're humble, they are intensely curious, and they have incredible work ethics. And when you have that kind of a dynamic or that kind of a mix, you tend to want to bring in other smart people and other diverse points of view.
Yeah, we had Anu Hariharan from YC yesterday, and she said, the biggest thing that they look at is the co-founding team, and sort of that chemistry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I think we have time for just one last question. So, where do you think we're going to be as a business travel industry in the next 5 years? What's going to be different?
Almost everything. Look, I think that, go back, maybe 10 years or so ago, the amount of, as a perspective, the amount of cash that's sitting in the top 5 market cap companies today is about $1 trillion. $1 trillion dollars, right? That was more than the market cap of the top 5 companies 15 years ago, right? And so the reality is change happens, dramatically. You just don't see it in the near term. And I think what you're going to see in business travel is massive changes. But it's going to be around the individual and how do you actually better serve them, which means much of the architecture of what serves the travel industry has to change. And this is why we make bets like Troop or Center or Spotnana. Yeah, it's going to take 15 years for these things to really play out. But you have to have a point of view where you want to go and why that's good. I would just end with this. This is the one piece that we did get right at Concur is that we always had this mantra around the company that you can't solve for what's good for you. You have to solve for what's best for the customer in a world where you may or may not benefit. And if you can divorce yourself from your benefit well enough, then you're unencumbered in solving for what the customer really needs. And I think that is an important perspective to bring to it.
And that applies whether it's leisure travel, business travel, just across across the spectrum.
That's right.
So Steve, we'll see you back here again and follow the journey
I look forward to it.
for Spotnana and Center and Troop. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
It's great to have you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Singh.
Thanks.